What if Atlantis was never lost? Atlantis Reborn. The Whispers. Beneath the Waves. Have you ever heard a story that lingers in your mind because it feels too real to be just a myth? Imagine a city, not marked on any modern map, yet described as more splendid than any empire humanity has ever built. A city where golden domes blazed in the morning sun, where white stone streets curved toward vast squares filled with music, laughter, and the cries of merchant ships pushing off from the greatest harbor in the ancient world. And then, in a single day and a single night, it was gone. No lantern light in the watchtowers, no voices on the docks, no trace on the surface of the sea. The ancients called it Atlantis. Over 2,000 years ago, Plato told this story. He claimed Atlantis had stood 9,000 years before his own lifetime, and that in one catastrophic moment, the ocean swallowed it whole. But here's what makes this story endure. So much of what Plato described aligns uncannily with real cataclysms in Earth's past, events modern science has confirmed. If you believe that some secrets still sleep beneath the waves, you're exactly where you need to be. And if this is your first time here, welcome to a journey where every legend is a door into history. Subscribe now, because what you're about to hear may change how you see the past forever. The world 12,000 years ago. Close your eyes and picture the Earth 12 millennia in the past. Vast ice sheets draped over much of North America and Europe. Glaciers hundreds of miles long ground their way through valleys, carving scars still visible today. Sea levels were nearly 400 feet lower than they are now. The Adriatic was not a sea, but a grassy plain. The North Sea was a vast green valley connecting England to continental Europe. Surviving in small hunting bands, some just beginning to farm and domesticate animals. Yet across these scattered tribes, whispers emerged, whispers of something far greater. On a massive island in the middle of the Atlantic, the legend says, rose a kingdom unlike anything before or since. It wasn't just a fishing village or a wealthy port. It was a maritime empire, its streets paved with white stone, its temples clad in rare metals, its harbors large enough to host fleets from every corner of the known world. The Atlanteans were masters of more than trade. They studied the stars, built monumental architecture, and commanded ships with both elegance and power. The Golden Age of Atlantis. Picture a morning in Atlantis. The sun rises, turning the ocean into molten gold. In the great harbor, warships unfurl white sails, gliding into open water. Merchant vessels prepare to leave, holds packed with treasures, pearls, spices, gold, silver, and gemstones mined deep within the island's heart. Markets awaken. The scent of cinnamon, clove, and nutmeg drifts on the breeze, mingling with fresh-caught fish and the warm bread from street ovens. Blacksmiths hammer bronze into blades and tools. Merchants call out prices. Children weave through the stalls in games of laughter and mischief. In the central square, scholars in long robes debate the orbits of the stars, the shifting of the seasons, the principles of just governance. On drill fields near the canals, soldiers practice with spear and shield, preparing for any who might challenge their supremacy. Atlantis was more than power. It was culture. Its rulers believed knowledge was the foundation of strength, and art was the soul of the people. Marble statues of gods lined public spaces. Frescoes told the story of their ancestors. Grand festivals honored the sea, their eternal ally and their greatest threat. Daily life. The pulse of a civilization. At dawn, bronze horns sounded from the watchtowers. Red-tiled domes glowed in the early light. From their windows, households hung bright-dyed cloth. deep blues, rich crimsons, symbols of prosperity and fortune. The harbor thrummed with energy. Sailors checked rigging. Amphorae of oil, wine, and grain were rolled aboard. Fishermen hauled in tuna, mackerel, and the occasional great swordfish, greeted by eager buyers. In noble villas near the city's core, marble courtyards shaded ancient olive trees. Pools mirrored the sky. Fountains carved in the shapes of dolphins sang softly in the morning air. Inside, silk-draped couches lined mosaic-floored halls. Painted maps of distant coasts hung beside depictions of legendary voyages. The streets were alive with gossip, music, and the steady hum of an empire at its height. Faith and ritual. The Temple of Poseidon. On the night of every full moon, the people gathered at the Temple of Poseidon, a colossal structure crowning the central hill. Its domes glowed with orichalcum, the reddish gold metal said to exist nowhere else on Earth. Hundreds in white robes formed solemn processions, carrying sea lilies and torches. Incense from rare resins curled upward, mingling with the low boom of drums and the haunting chords of stringed instruments. Priests chanted in the ancient Atlantean tongue, praying for calm seas and bountiful harvests. According to legend, Poseidon himself had once fallen in love with a mortal woman here. And from that union came the royal bloodline. Every ritual was a vow to honor the ocean, their provider, and their executioner. Signs of doom. When harmony turns to pride. Plato wrote that the Atlanteans had once lived in harmony, respecting the laws of nature, but power and wealth gave way to arrogance. The empire turned outward, conquering distant lands, demanding tribute, and imposing its will on others. And then came the omens. Weeks of tremors shook the ground. Storm tides rose higher than anyone could remember. Winds shifted unpredictably. Crops failed. Cyclones of unprecedented force lashed the coasts. Wise men warned of disaster, but few listened. How could a civilization that had stood for thousands of years fall in a single night? Plato's account is brief but terrifying. It happened in one day and one night. The sky turned black with thunderclouds. Lightning ripped the heavens apart. The ground shuddered violently, toppling towers and splitting streets. Volcanoes erupted beneath the sea, spewing columns of steam and ash. Then came the walls of water, tsunamis as high as the tallest spires, roaring into the city. Streets became rivers. Plazas became whirlpools. Ships were flung onto rooftops. When dawn broke, there was nothing left. Only the smooth, unbroken surface of the sea. Rebuilding the lost city today, satellites, sonar, and artificial intelligence let us drain the ocean in ways no ancient could imagine. Feeding bathymetric maps, geological data, and ancient coastline models into the AI, we reconstruct the Atlantic basin as it might have looked 12,000 years ago. In the simulation, a shape rises from the deep. 200 miles southwest of Gibraltar, massive concentric rings, partly buried in silt, yet too symmetrical to ignore. The outer ring holds the homes of common citizens, red-tiled roofs, narrow cobbled streets, markets shaded by bright awnings. The second ring is for nobles and scholars, marble villas with gardens, shaded courtyards, and libraries filled with scrolls on astronomy, medicine, and navigation. At the center, the Temple of Poseidon commands the skyline. Golden domes catch the light. Colossal columns rise toward the heavens. A towering statue of the sea god watches over a man-made lagoon, its waters glinting under the sun. From here, canals lead to the great harbor. Warships with crimson-painted hulls rest alongside merchant vessels heavy with silks, pearls, spices, and gold. The harbor connects directly to the city's heart, a marvel of design unmatched even in later civilizations. The AI's reconstruction is so vivid you can almost hear the creak of rigging, the chatter of merchants, and the roar of waves against the breakwater. Where legend meets evidence. Seeing Atlantis, brought back to life through simulation, makes the legend harder to dismiss. The concentric ring layout, the strategic location, the fusion of culture, faith, and trade, it all feels too coherent to be pure invention. But the simulation also shows its fragility. A city bound to the sea for life could be undone by that same sea in a single day. The whisper that still echoes. In this first chapter, we have walked white-paved streets, stood beneath golden domes, and felt the heartbeat of an empire at its height. We've seen the clues that tie Plato's words to possible structures beneath the Atlantic. But next, we will witness the fall. Until then, remember this: history is not always written in ink. Sometimes it is carved in stone, buried in silt, and whispered through the deep. And if you listen closely, Atlantis is still speaking. The Age of Wonders. Part 2 of Atlantis Reborn. Imagine standing on the highest terrace of Atlantis, the wind from the Western Ocean in your face, the entire city unfolding beneath you like a living tapestry. White avenues spiral outward in perfect symmetry. Gold and bronze catch the morning sun. Canals gleam like ribbons of glass. From the harbor, sails bloom on the horizon, each one carrying goods, stories, and cultures from lands so far that most will never see them with their own eyes. This was the Age of Wonders. The era when Atlantis was not merely a city, it was the axis around which the known world turned. And in this chapter, we will walk its streets, sail its waters, and stand inside its halls at the very height of its power. Historical backdrop, the web of trade and influence. By the time Atlantis entered its golden centuries, it had mastered the seas in a way no other civilization could match. Its location, midway between Europe, Africa, and the Americas, made it a natural crossroads. Merchant fleets returned from the icy north with amber, furs, and iron. From the south came gold, ivory, and rare spices. The east sent silk, glasswork, and knowledge carried by travelers who had crossed deserts and mountains. Atlantis was not a fortress closed to the world. It was a gateway. Its docks heard more languages than any other port. Its markets overflowed with goods from lands beyond the imagination of common folk. But trade was not the only reason for its dominance. The Atlanteans had learned something powerful, that knowledge moves like a current, and whoever controls its flow controls the tide of history. They collected maps, navigational charts, astronomical tables. They copied books from foreign scholars and stored them in vast archives beneath the Temple of Poseidon. In doing so, they turned Atlantis into the greatest library of maritime wisdom the world had yet known. Daily life, the rhythm of the great city, morning markets. At sunrise, the harbor markets burst into life. Fishmongers displayed tuna and swordfish still glistening from the nets. Bakers carry trays of honeyed bread. Traders from inland bring baskets of figs, dates, and pomegranates. The air is a symphony of scents, the salt of the sea, the sweet of ripe fruit, the spice of saffron and cinnamon. You can hear deals being struck in the open. A Phoenician merchant trading purple-dyed cloth for Atlantean gold. A North African sailor selling ostrich feathers to a noble servant. Craftsmen and artists. In workshops lining the artisan quarter, metalsmiths hammer intricate jewelry from gold and orichalcum. Potters shape vases painted with seafaring scenes and legends of the gods. Stonecutters carve reliefs depicting storms, voyages, and festivals. Art was not just decoration here. It was a language, a way of telling the story of Atlantis to future generations. Homes and gardens. The commoner's home was modest. Plastered walls, a small courtyard, clay roof tiles, but even these had beauty. Many kept pots of herbs, painted their walls with seascapes, and carved patterns into their doors. The noble estates, by contrast, were marvels. Multi-story villas with marble colonnades, mosaic floors depicting constellations, private baths fed by aqueducts, and gardens filled with olive, fig, and lemon trees. Cultural flourish, the soul of Atlantis. Atlantis thrived not only because of its fleets, but because of its mind. Music and performance public squares hosted musicians who played the lyra and the aulos, their melodies weaving through the air with the chatter of the crowd. Dancers in brightly dyed silks moved in patterns inspired by the sea, flowing, circling, crashing like waves. Festivals drew thousands. The Festival of the Tides, held twice a year, celebrated the changing seasons and the harmony between the city and the ocean. Ships would be decorated with garlands and set afloat in procession, carrying offerings to Poseidon. Learning and debate. The Atlanteans loved debate almost as much as they loved the sea. The Hall of Scholars, a marble amphitheater near the central ring, was open to any citizen who could speak with wit and knowledge. Philosophers discussed ethics, explorers recounted journeys, inventors demonstrated new tools for navigation, military power, the shield and the spear. Beneath its beauty, Atlantis was a force to be reckoned with. The city's navy was the largest in the known world. Warships, sleek, double-banked galleys, could outmaneuver and outrun most opponents. Their hulls were reinforced with layered timbers, and their bronze rams could splinter an enemy vessel in moments. The army was no less formidable. Soldiers trained daily with spear, sword, and shield. Units specialized in amphibious landings, allowing Atlantis to strike swiftly along coasts. But their military was not purely defensive. Atlantis used its power to enforce tribute, secure trade routes, and sometimes to expand its influence over weaker nations. Political ambitions. The turning point. During the Age of Wonders, Atlantis began to see itself not just as a kingdom, but as the rightful ruler of the seas. Diplomatic missions became ultimatums. Alliances were forged with gifts of gold, and broken when those gifts ceased. Some historians believe this was the beginning of the pride Plato warned about, the slow shift from stewardship to domination. Yet within the city, most citizens saw only prosperity. The markets thrived, the docks were full, and the festivals grew more extravagant. Few recognized that the seeds of downfall were already sown. Walking through the peak of glory, we fly in from the sea, over the breakwater and into the great harbor. Dozens of ships lie at anchor, war galleys, merchant vessels, fishing boats, their sails and hulls painted in vibrant patterns. From above, the concentric rings of the city are unmistakable. The outermost ring buzzes with markets, shipyards, and housing for sailors and workers. The second ring holds administrative buildings, noble homes, and the Hall of Scholars. At the center rises the Temple of Poseidon, larger than any structure around it, its golden domes catching the sunlight. The AI walks us through the streets. We pass a spice merchant's stall, inhaling the scent of distant lands. We step into a sculptor's workshop, where a half-finished statue of a sea god towers overhead. We cross a bridge over a canal, watching a cargo barge glide beneath. Everywhere, the sense of purpose is palpable. Atlantis was not merely a place to live. It was a statement of human ambition. A city that believed it could last forever. This was Atlantis at its height, Powerful, wealthy, radiant with culture and pride, a place that seemed immune to time. But history is not kind to those who believe themselves untouchable. In the next chapter, we will watch as the Age of Wonders gives way to the Day of Destruction, the night when the sea rose, the sky fell, and a civilization was erased. Until then, remember, the higher the peak, the deeper the fall. And the whispers beneath the waves grow louder, the closer we get to the end.
The Fall Part 3 of Atlantis Reborn, a calm before the end. They say empires fall slowly until the final moment when the whole sky breaks at once. Atlantis believed it was eternal. After all, how could a city that mastered the seas, mapped the stars, and fed its people from 3 continents be anything but unshakable? But the truth of history is this. It doesn't matter how high your towers rise if they are built too close to the sea. This is the story of how it ended. The signs no one heeded, the silence before the roar, and the final night when the ocean came to collect its dead. Ominous signs. Nature turns uneasy. It began with tremors, subtle at first. Just a low hum beneath the feet, barely enough to rattle ceramic jugs on the shelves. Most shrugged it off. Atlantis, after all, had stood for thousands of years. What was a little shaking, but the tremors grew stronger, more frequent. Birds began fleeing inland. Whales were spotted near the harbors, not in pods, but alone, disoriented, crashing into docks. The tides swelled beyond their usual reach. Canals overflowed at dawn. Salt crept into fields that had once grown barley and flax. Crops failed without explanation. Goats birthed malformed young. The winds shifted direction unnaturally, whipping in patterns the farmers could not read. Priests warned of omens. Stars misaligned, eclipses out of season. Some whispered that the gods had turned their backs, but the Senate ignored them. There have always been storms, they said. There have always been earthquakes. But never like this. Never all at once. Political turmoil, the fragile heart cracks. As nature trembled, so did the empire's unity. Disagreements flared in the Senate. Should they move citizens inland? Should fleets be recalled? Should sacrifices be made? Every faction had a different answer. Arguments turned into shouts, shouts into threats. Outside the marble halls, the people grew restless. Rumors spread like wildfire that the royal line was cursed, that Atlantis had violated ancient oaths, that their pride had reached too far. The once proud capital murmured with fear. Some nobles quietly fled, their ships disappearing under cover of night. Others hoarded supplies, reinforcing their estates like fortresses. But most simply waited. Atlantis had stood for millennia. Surely it would survive another storm. The last festival, dancing on the edge. Then came the full moon. By tradition, it was time for the Festival of the Tides, a celebration of the city's bond with the sea. Despite the unease, the Senate insisted it go on. A show of strength, they declared, a gift to the gods, a sign that Atlantis does not fear the ocean. And so the people gathered. The harbor was dressed in gold and coral. Ships were draped in flowers, musicians played, dancers spun in silks of blue and green, mimicking waves under torchlight. On the steps of the Temple of Poseidon, priests poured libations into sacred fountains. Children tossed petals into the sea. The sky was cloudless, the air warm. For a moment, it felt like old times, but beneath the waves, something was stirring. At the height of the ceremony, a strange silence fell. Birds stopped singing. The breeze died. A dog began to howl. Somewhere, glass shattered from no visible force, and then the ground buckled. The cataclysm, a night of fire and water. It struck without mercy. The earth groaned like a wounded beast. Entire districts split open. Statues toppled. Temples cracked. Fires burst from the ground as molten rock erupted through the streets. From the harbor came the sound no one would forget. Not a wave, not a roar, but a scream. A wall of water, higher than any tower, rushed inland with impossible speed. It crushed ships as if they were toys. It shattered the breakwaters. Markets, villas, libraries, swallowed in seconds. People ran, they tried, but there was nowhere to run. The concentric rings became death traps. The inner canals overflowed. Bridges collapsed, panic reigned. Mothers screamed for their children. Priests clung to shattered idols. Scholars wept as scrolls turned to pulp. Then came the second wave, and the third. Volcanoes erupted offshore. Ash rained down, turning day to night. Lightning tore the skies. Towers exploded in flame as gas ignited underground. And then, the final blow. The earth itself opened. The central plaza, the heart of Atlantis, crumbled into the sea. The temple of Poseidon sank, its golden dome vanishing beneath black water. Statues of the gods were pulled under like pebbles. In a single night, everything was gone. Aftermath, the silence of the deep. When morning came, there was no morning. Only an endless sheet of gray water, where a continent once stood. The sun rose to find nothing but mist and foam. Survivors? Perhaps a few, clinging to driftwood, scattered on distant shores. But they had no maps, no witnesses, only memory. Atlantis was not conquered, it was erased, replaying the end of Vecth. In the simulation we slow time. Tectonic plates shift beneath the Atlantic. Pressure builds, the fault lines snap. We watch shock waves ripple outward, silent killers. It shows the harbor at the moment of impact. The water drains, a deep breath, then returns as a mountain. The city's lights flicker, then vanish. Through motion capture, we track the fall of towers, the paths of floodwaters, the ash cloud covering the region. Every detail, every heartbreak. The simulation replays the last 30 minutes, again and again, as if the past refuses to let go. But there's more. The data shows something else. A chain reaction of collapses across distant coasts. Tsunamis strike Europe, earthquakes rattle Africa. Even the Americas feel tremors. The fall of Atlantis may not have been just Atlantis. What is lost beneath? So ends the third chapter. The night the sea rose to reclaim a kingdom built too close to its heart. But is Atlantis truly gone? Or did it plant seeds in the memories of survivors? Myths whispered in caves, symbols carved in stone, stories passed down until they became legends. In part 4, we follow the echoes. Where did the survivors go? What fragments remain? And what civilizations rose from the dust of Atlantis? Because sometimes a city must die for the world to be reborn. The Echoes remain part 4 of Atlantis Reborn. If Atlantis died, why do we still hear its name? Atlantis sank. That we know. Or at least we believe. But if it truly vanished, consumed by water and fire, buried beneath time and tectonic wrath, why do we still speak of it? Why does the name echo in so many cultures? Why does it live not in one myth, but in dozens, oceans apart? Perhaps Atlantis didn't disappear entirely. Perhaps it survived in fragments, in bloodlines, in languages, in temples half forgotten. Perhaps what died was only the city, but the idea, the legacy, the civilization, it endured. Scattered survivors, the diaspora of a sunken kingdom, they fled, we imagine, those who saw the towers fall, who swam through fire and foam. Not all perished, not all forgot. Some drifted westward, to the coasts of what we now call America. Others sailed east, toward the Nile, toward the Fertile Crescent, toward memory. These were no ordinary refugees. They were astronomers, builders, storytellers, navigators. They carried in their minds the blueprints of a world now drowned. Not in books, not in machines, but in stories, in rituals, in stone. And wherever they landed, they built again. Not the same city, never again, but echoes of a shape once whole. The temple patterns, echoes in architecture. Let us look at the blueprints. In Mexico, the pyramids of Teotihuacan, vast, precise, aligned with the stars. In Egypt, the Great Pyramid, its base matching the proportions of Atlantean rings described by Plato. In Malta, megalithic temples with curved concentric layouts. In Crete, the Palace of Knossos, multi-ringed, labyrinthine, with frescoes of sea creatures and bulls, just like the bull worship of Atlantis. Coincidence or collective memory? No direct line connects them, no signed scroll, no engraved map. But the echoes are there, in angles, in altars, in architecture that seems born of the same dream. Language and lore, fragments in the tongue, words survive longer than walls, and myths, even longer than words. Across continents, we find flood myths. From the Ziusudra epic of Sumer, to the tale of Deucalion in Greece, to the story of Coxcox in Mesoamerica, always the water rises. Always a few survive. In Dogon oral tradition of Mali, they speak of Namo, amphibious beings from the sky who taught civilization. In the legends of the Guanches of the Canary Islands, islands not far from Plato's Pillars of Hercules. There are tales of a sunken land their ancestors came from. Even in Australia, the Yuin peoples speak of sacred mountains that sank beneath the sea after their people angered the gods. Different lands, different tongues, but the same shape of story. Atlantis lives in what we remember, without remembering why. The Atlantean flame, ideas that refuse to die beyond ruins and stories. What did Atlantis truly leave behind? Not gold, not technology, but something harder to define. A fire, a hunger for knowledge, a belief that humans could rise beyond survival, to art, to science, to harmony with nature. Atlantis, as Plato wrote, was not evil. It became arrogant, yes, corrupted, yes, but at its height it was a beacon, a fusion of intellect and beauty, power and restraint. That ideal of enlightened civilization re-emerged in echoes, in the mystery schools of Egypt, in the philosophy of Pythagoras, in the astronomical temples of the Maya, in the Renaissance dream of the perfect city. Even in the modern yearning for lost wisdom, Atlantis did not birth utopia, but it may have planted the seed of its pursuit, mapping the myth through data. Now the simulation asks, what happens when we overlay the legends? What if we cross-reference architecture, language, and flood patterns? AI scans tectonic lines, dating ancient settlements that oddly appeared just after the estimated fall of Atlantis. It compares the orbital alignments of temples built oceans apart, somehow pointing to the same stars. It finds linguistic patterns, shared syllables in words for sea, sun, God, in Proto-Indo-European, Nahuatl, and Basque. It tracks migrations of DNA from ancient seafarers whose genes appear in both North Africa and South America. No single thread proves Atlantis rose again, but together, the pattern is unmistakable. Atlantis may not have ended, it may have dispersed. Closing message, the city that became a song. Atlantis was not just a city, it was a story, too powerful to be drowned. And like all great stories, it adapted. It traveled, it embedded itself in new tongues, new temples, new dreams. Perhaps that's why we can never let it go, because in chasing Atlantis, we are chasing our own potential. Our memory of what we once reached for and might reach again. In Part 5, we follow that memory to its farthest horizon, where myth meets prophecy, and the idea of Atlantis is reborn in the world of tomorrow. The Hollow Crown, Part 5 of Atlantis Reborn. What remains after a city dies? What is left when a city crumbles? When its towers fall, its maps fade, its name becomes a whisper? Is it truly gone? Or does something remain? A dream, a warning, a crown, not of gold or stone, but of meaning. Atlantis wore such a crown, and though its body sank beneath the waves, its story did not. This is the tale of that final echo, and of what may yet rise. The empty throne, the loss we cannot name. We live in the ruins of lost things. Civilizations rise, they burn bright, and then vanish. Babylon, Mohenjo-Daro, Cahokia. We find shards, skeletons, myths, but the soul is gone. Atlantis is no different, or perhaps it is, because its soul never quite left. It became legend before it could become dust. A city that died not with a scream, but with a whisper that never stopped. The Atlanteans are gone, but their throne remains, empty, waiting, the resurgence. Humanity remembers itself. In the last century, something strange happened. We began to dream like Atlantis. We looked to the stars again. We spoke of harmony with Earth. We rebuilt cities not just for survival, but for beauty, for balance. We invented machines that speak in light. We learned to split atoms and heal genes. We saw our planet from space and felt small and united. It is as if, unknowingly, we are tracing old blueprints. Blueprints once held by drowned hands. We are not Atlanteans, but perhaps we are becoming them. The simulation speaks, a future seen through the past. In the final AI reconstruction, something breathtaking occurs. The system, having absorbed thousands of myths, ruins, and rituals, generates a projection. Not of Atlantis as it was, but as it might be. If we built it now, it sketches a city powered by tides and sunlight, floating platforms that rise with the sea, gardens that clean the air, temples for thought, not fear, libraries that speak every language. No weapons, no walls, only bridges. The AI does not claim this is Atlantis. It calls it Echo Prime, the first echo, not a return, but a beginning. The final message, The crown is ours to claim. Atlantis was a crown, once worn, now fallen. Its stones rest in silence, but its symbol lives. We stand at the threshold. We can build empires of data or wisdom, towers of greed or light. The myths we inherit are not burdens. They are blueprints. Atlantis is not behind us. It is ahead, a horizon of what we could become. The crown is not lost. It is hollow, waiting, and it fits the head of whoever dares to remember and dares to dream again. Still here? Then maybe you too are searching for Atlantis, not just in the past, but in what humanity might yet become. If this story moved you, subscribe to Obscure Truths. More forgotten myths, more echoes worth hearing, more truths just out of reach. Subscribe. Dive deeper. The next legend awaits.